If you or anyone else you know is in the market to buy or sell a home, make sure you visit ccrealty.org today. We are the only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its commissions to nonprofits dedicated to fighting climate change, and we operate in all 50 states. Enjoy the podcast. Barry, really great to meet you, man. Thanks so much for taking some time to come on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, that's my pleasure. Absolutely.
Yeah, glad to have you. What you're doing is really awesome, a nice innovation. I'm excited to kind of dive into all of it. But before we do, we always like to get the show started with some background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the current moment.
Well, so I'm ex-military. I served in the Royal Air Force for 4 years, and that was in the top end of Scotland. So every single season in one day, horizontal rain, snow, sun, wind, everything, just probably within an hour. Typical Scottish weather. But when I came out of the Royal Air Force, I self-taught IT, then went on to do more Microsoft exams and qualifications than I could shake a stick at, and worked in the investment banking industry for some very large companies managing change projects for around 22 years.
What inspired you to get into the Royal Air Force originally? I don't know how the military, or if you even call it the military, works out in England.
Yeah, so I think I got to about 12 years old and I was introduced to the Air Training Corps, which is like the youth military, and just seemed to fit in. And from that moment on, I knew I was gonna join. I grew up in the northwest of England, in what was or what is the type of town where people migrate into. So big city, and people migrate out into the suburbs. But it was one of those small towns, wanting to get out, wanting to find myself in the world. But I knew from an early age that's what I wanted. So I did. Simple as that.
Yeah. So then you went from serving the Queen to serving the fat cats at the big banks. How did you end up doing that? What called you to investment banking or financial services?
The money, to be honest.
Of course.
A military salary back in the 80s wasn't all that, but no, it was the introduction to. That was the time when innovation in computing was moving at a lightning speed. Right up until the year 2000 and the Millennium Bug, and all of that, we were innovating all the time. There were new products coming out constantly, so you were constantly learning. And in order just to keep up, you were doing exams, you were studying and working, but you were working very, very long hours. And investment banking, yes, investment banking pays very well, but they like their pound of flesh that goes with it. So, it was one of those exciting eras, really, where you just saw things moving from one step to the next rather rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, as we were kind of discussing before the show started, that seems to kind of be the case all the time, whether people want to accept it or not. But it seems like the pace, if anything, is accelerating. It's just, are we going down the right path? I don't know if there is a right path, but there's certainly a better path and a worse path. And I'm always trying to find the one that's the best for me and everyone else,
I think we're more aware of the right path now. The joy of the internet is the fact that we have all this information available to us, whether disinformation, bad information, but you have the access to all that information. And there's more opportunity to make your own mind up, to be honest. Whether you make the right choice is entirely down to you, but you have that information available to you. There's a lot more transparency in the world than there used to be. Yeah, we used to have to get our news from the TV, the radio, or a newspaper. Now it's instant. You know what's happening in your local neighborhood or across the world because it's on Twitter first. And we didn't have those things. So I think people have more of an opportunity to pick the right path.
And the interesting thing about the ability to make your own mind up is that you get to decide what the right path is. I think it's really important to be introspective and think about who you are, where you come from, and what really makes you feel good in life. That's the right path for you. And there's no right path for everyone. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with the education system in the US. I'm not sure if it's in the UK as well. I always, Pink Floyd, we don't need no education. I think of that kind of stuff. Everyone knows I'm a big believer in free thought and expression, and that's how you get amazing, new, innovative ideas. And it comes with it, arrogance and problems, but that's life, isn't it? So how did financial services lead you to becoming an entrepreneur and founding two different companies? One that we'll focus on for most of the podcast, but I want to cover the one that you made before that as well.
Yeah, so I've managed change for investment banks. And that was my role. My background is in IT, mainly infrastructure technology, so servers, networks, storage, that type of thing. And storage used to be huge, massive systems, and they've got smaller and smaller and better and better. But it was always managing the transition from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got multiple stakeholders, you've got your legacy, you've got your new, you've got the meeting of the two, and I think that sets you up well as an entrepreneur. But what I think everybody who gets into business, in similar vein, people who get into politics, they get into politics or they get into business first because they want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's not I'm going to do this because I'm going to make a lot of money. It's I'm doing something I love to do. And the byproduct is I hope to make a lot of money, but it's a byproduct. And I think that the two are very, very closely aligned. Managing change, transition from one thing to another is very, very similar to becoming an entrepreneur.
I think we're very aligned in that viewpoint. And I think people who don't start businesses don't really understand. They think of someone like Elon or Bill Gates because they've become these really wealthy, I'm not going to say successful, just very wealthy people. They think that's why someone gets into it. But I couldn't agree with you more. And I also believe that there's no way to succeed unless you personally are aligned with the mission, whatever it may be. If it's revolutionizing communication or providing a better way for people to do shopping, people get into something everyone wants to make a living or become very wealthy. Perhaps I'm not really interested in that, but the business, a business exists to propagate some sort of mission. So before we get into talking about your most recent venture, Alpha 311, can you tell me what Me Now is and why you started this company?
So Me Now, basically, it's an app for small businesses. So I'd seen a problem where small businesses were using Facebook and Twitter and to some extent Instagram, but not so much, as a way of trying to fill their appointments.
Hmm.
And yet they already have a customer base. Now, the Me Now app was designed to effectively allow customers to follow the businesses they used all the time and turn on a notification. So if the business had a slot or appointment become free, so it's very service based.
Mm-hmm.
Restaurants, hairdressers, dog groomers, that
Real
kind of
estate agents.
real estate agents. And what it was able to do is it would notify customers who opted in for notifications that there's a slot come free.
Oh.
So if my wife wanted a hairdresser's appointment, she could just follow her hairdresser, and if there was a cancellation, rather than wait 6 weeks in order to take that, a notification would come up and she could contact the hairdresser directly and say, yes, I'll take that appointment. So from a small business point of view, they're constantly filling the gaps that they have, because if there's a gap, they're losing money.
Yeah.
And that was, we worked so hard on a complete shoestring budget to build this app. And then a pandemic hit.
People will be doing more digital appointments, no?
No, because over
Oh,
here,
like
that was it.
in.
We were locked down.
Oh yeah.
So
You're
you
good.
couldn't
You're
go
good
to a
now.
hairdresser, you couldn't
You're
go
good
to a
now, right?
restaurant. Oh, no, we literally, so we have a number of challenges here. So number one, cost of living
Interesting.
is going through the roof. So
Uh-huh.
people aren't spending the money that they would spend. Number two, we have Brexit. So the UK has left the European Union, which meant a lot of the hospitality staff and waiting staff have gone back to Europe and have not returned.
Wow.
So you've now got the opposite, where those small businesses don't have the gaps that they would have had previously. So we've parked it. Yeah, we're
Uh-huh.
still paying a monthly fee to Amazon every month just to keep it ticking over. And then as things pick back up, then we'll reinstate it and see what we can do to really get it going again. But it was born out of trying to solve a problem for small business owners at a relatively low cost with regards to communicating with their customer base and not having the SEO experience, the constantly managing Facebook
Right.
or whatever, because these people tend to be either working by themselves or very small groups. You don't have anybody checking the Facebook Messenger every 2 seconds to see if somebody wants a table or a hairdressing appointment. But
Cool.
we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
We'll find a way to make it free,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll just give that to small businesses. There'll be a
Right.
different way to
Well, I was
to
interested
monetize that.
because I'm a small business and I could definitely use something to help with booking appointments. And when people don't show up for podcasts, it'd be great to have another one come in, but that's another story. So
Yeah,
you're paying Amazon, you said? Is that AWS that you pay to have the
yeah.
app?
It's just to have the app, and pretty much we've just had to mothball it for now, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, for people who are listening who don't realize, Amazon actually makes back in when I was in university, as I would say if I'm talking to someone from the UK, but in college, back when I was in college, I learned that Amazon Web Services was like 60% of their revenue for people who don't realize. So big companies
Yeah.
can become creative and find a better revenue source than they initially thought of. So speaking of kind of new ideas, when you said you were mostly focusing on IT and you used the phrase change work. So I'm wondering if while you're working in these big companies, were you consistently coming up with kind of new ideas and ways to make things new efficient, and were you always kind of finding these gaps in the market, or is this more a newer thing for you?
I think it was a gap. We were always trying to find ways to make things more efficient within investment banking.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. So historically, in investment banking, you would have multiple layers of servers. So you'd have your production servers where everything running live is available. You'd have a backup, so an exact mirror, just in case something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd have a user acceptance testing for any changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have development. So you've got four replicas of the same network. And one of the things that we did was we decided, well, actually, we can save a lot of money here by getting rid of the user acceptance layer and using the backup, but just with some different storage. So you've still got the same servers, but rather than connect to your production storage, you connect to your user acceptance storage. So we cut a third off the bill
Yeah.
just by doing that one process. But that took a year and a half to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have different layers of different types of storage, how long you are storing that, etc. So we were always looking at ways to improve. And I think that was the key going into doing this doing me now first, because it was about efficiency for the multiple small business owners. This alpha is a completely different ball game, but it
Totally.
was born out of the networking events for the Me Now project.
Yeah. Well, it is this idea of this amazing technology and potential we have with wind power, and finding ways to improve that and become more efficient, perhaps on a smaller scale. So, Leah, let's get into kind of talking about it. What is Alpha 311? Why don't you maybe recount the origin story as well?
So we were, myself and my co-founder John Sanderson, we were traveling up and down the motorway at a time when our local state was turning off the streetlights at night to save money.
Uh-huh.
So that's quite a fundamental thing. If you know, the roads aren't well used, but the lighting's there for safety. and you're turning it off because you can't afford to keep it. So it was a case of, why hasn't anybody put, you follow a truck driving down the freeway, you can see by the side of the road the impact that their airflow is having just on the trees by the side. Why has nobody tried to capture that? Turns out there's a lot of patents exactly looking at that, and there's a lot of studies with different sized vehicles displacing air at different amounts, etc. But what we looked at was, how could you get a local authority to put a turbine system on a road if they haven't got any money?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? So there has to be a benefit. And Alpha 311 was born out of the fact that every local renewable energy project should have a benefit to the local community. That's how it was born.
Right.
How can you give the most benefit to that local community? I'll give you an example. Where I am now, in Whitstable in England, next town along is 7 miles away, and between us, they're going to build one of the largest solar farms in Europe. My electricity bill will still be exactly the same. Yet, between the two, all I will see is solar panels. So where's the benefit? Where's the benefit to me and the two communities that this solar farm? Well, it's renewable energy. Okay, the energy is coming from a good place, but my bill's still the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's no actual benefit other than it's green. So where's the incentive for the local community to want to have that in their backyard? You can replace solar with a 800-foot tall wind turbine. In fact, you can replace it with 10 of them. But people don't want them in their backyards. So where's the benefit? And this is how Alpha was born. So we knew people have thought of this before. We had seen all the studies, but the difference was we weren't using what we already had, which was the road.
Right.
And the lighting columns. And the fact that every lighting column is connected to the grid, because that's how it gets the power for the light.
Mm-hmm.
Energy flows both directions. If you go put solar on your house, your local utility provider isn't going to come and put a separate cable to take the energy from your solar. Uses the same one. And that's where this was born. So Alpha 311 is a retrofit turbine. You take the header unit off the lighting column and you lower the turbine with the lighting column right through the middle of it. And you put the header unit back on. And as traffic goes past on one side, it turns the turbine. But if you put it in the median of the highway, traffic's coming the other direction as well.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got double the airspeed impacting your turbine on every single lighting column. If you can double the airspeed impacting your wind turbine, you've got 8 times the volume of air that can be converted into energy.
Wow. So when people think of a turbine, they think of this giant white stick with 3 blades spinning on top of it. How could that
Yes.
possibly be integrated into a road? How is yours different?
So vertical axis wind turbines are built differently. So they usually the turbine is determined by the central shaft. So if a big turbine, top end of a tower, 3 blades, has a horizontal shaft.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of one side is the blades, at the end there is a load of gears and a generator, but that shaft is horizontal. A vertical axis wind turbine tends to have its shaft pointing straight up. Well, we remove the shaft, because there's a lamppost in the middle of it instead.
Yep.
But it's the same basic function. It rotates around the pole, not as a 3-bladed propeller, effectively. Now, turbines have been around for, I think the Chinese were supposed to have invented them 2,000 years ago.
I mean, that's basically how like all energy is basically from turbines. It's either steam pushing a turbine, isn't it? Like the basic way we
Water,
create energy, water. Yeah, it's all just
water, but
pushing stuff.
for the most part, it's steam. Yeah, nuclear power plants heat up water, and steam rotates a generator. Exactly the
Hmm.
same thing. It's all propeller based.
Right. Who invented this vertical axis turbine? How old is that?
Apparently it was the Persians around something like 500 AD,
Oh, so old
and
school.
that oh yeah, old school, and it was rather than a blade, it was a sail.
Hmm.
It's the same thing you have on a ship. If you think about it, they just put lots of them around, and they were used to pump water. But the most common, so European windmills used to get the great big four bladed propellers, uh, very common in the Netherlands.
Hmm.
If you've ever seen any of the old Dutch photos,
Yep.
that they were used to grind grain to make flour.
Right. So the company originated with this idea of providing an essential service to people who are struggling to afford it or communities that are struggling to afford it, creating a more efficient and using a resource which is not something that many people would think of, which is the wind coming off of cars, which is a pretty substantial amount when you think about how many people are driving each day. We're concerned about the energy power in the cars, but there's so many more pieces, and that's one of the things I love most about trying to tackle the climate crisis or reducing carbon emissions is there's these glaring inefficiencies in the way we live. And it's not just about what we do, it's really a lot about what we don't do as well. It's letting these things go. I always think of like gray water or even like human waste. It seems like we could be using that in a more efficient way, making compost and stuff. But that's really cool that you came up with the idea, and it's kind of expanded from there. How does the
Well,
go ahead?
the idea was that we just wanted to power the street lights.
Yeah.
Individual street lights don't use a lot of power. In fact,
Right.
LED lights now are around 117 watts.
Hmm.
It's nothing. It's nothing at all. But then, so we gave that to some very clever people, Institute of Thermofluids and a professor from Leeds University, and basically said, "What are you going to do with the rest of the energy?" We're like, oh, okay. And that was 2.5 years ago, and what we have now is much, much more efficient. Um, if you've ever stood by the side of a road and a truck has come past,
Hmm.
you felt that energy.
Hmm.
Whether it's a bus, whether it's a garbage truck, literally a second and a half later, you have felt that air. Same as being by a train and a high speed train's come past. You can feel the air and the energy of that air moving in that direction. So we harness that energy into rotation. Unlike traditional turbines, where you need big, great big blades, because you're looking at the size of a swept area. The bigger the swept area, the more energy can be produced per single turn. We're going for rotational speed. So we have an alternator. It's an American company that makes our alternator. And that is unique to us and designed to operate at around 150 to 300 RPM. That spinning motion will produce enough power to equal around 30 solar panels per turbine per day.
When you say a panel, I think of a giant, maybe 4 by 3 foot thing that someone's laying on a roof. Is that one panel, or is like there are
That's one panel.
okay, 33 of those from
30.
30 from a truck
Yeah.
driving by the road.
It's the dual airflow. It's having that one vehicle going on one side of the turbine and another vehicle coming the other side of the turbine. That's
Well,
the difference.
Well, the necessity is kind of. I was kind of strange when you said that they turn the lights off at night. It seems like that's when you need when are they using? When were they using the lights? If it was like, would they have the lights
That
on during the
and
day? Like, you know what I mean?
yeah. Well, no, that's the point. In other words, they sort of basically said, well, between the hours of midnight and 3 in the morning, there's very little traffic, so we'll turn the lights off.
Hmm.
and that saves over 40,000 lights. That saves X amount per day. It makes sense. But it wasn't the fact that we saw it as a problem, and that spawned what we have now. That was the starting point. What we have now is vastly superior to where we were 3 years ago.
Well, that's very interesting. Can you kind of explain how that progression happened? And I think I had read something that you said you got the cost down like to a very, very smaller amount by changing what you made the turbine out of to a carbon, or what was it? It was like down from like $110 to $4. Is that all? Is that what kind of that process that you're talking about?
Yeah. So, so what that is so we use carbon fiber composite for the turbine because it's ultralight and very, very strong. We have been testing, and we have a version that is made from recycled plastic. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't work on a podcast, but you can see my camera, which means you can see.
Oh, kind of. Looks like a giant.
Let's go a bit closer.
Looked like a giant roll of toilet paper for a second. Oh, it's a turbine. I can see. Big.
It's a turbine. But this is made from recycled plastic.
Right. And that's what you're making yours out of. And it used to be made out of a metal material.
So we're making it out of composite. So it's carbon fiber. Mm-hmm. This is the future, in that if we can get the weight down, the difference in material cost goes from about £3,000 down to £4.
That's quite the difference.
It is, but it's high density thermoplastic. It's way too heavy right now. We need to spend more time and money developing that. And as just being a fledgling company, we just need to get product out the door right now.
Right.
So we'll stick with the carbon fiber, which is fine. At the end of its life, we can chop it up and make a carbon fiber mash and reuse it. But the future would be a recycled thermoplastic, because then we can, at the end of its life, we can chop it up and use it to make more turbines.
So I guess my only kind of immediate concern would be, is there any kind of health and safety issues when there's this spinning turbine right next to the road that's being powered by the amount of cars driving by? Is there any way it can like cut down the light or spin too fast and, I don't know, explode or something?
No. So there's, from a health and safety point of view, people would need to, from people point of view, they'd need to get past the lanes of cars first to get to the turbine. Right. The turbine being carbon fiber, it's immensely strong. And this is Formula One, so IndyCar type grade carbon fiber. So immensely strong, but immensely light. Because it's rotating around the column, there's no impact to the column at all whatsoever. Mm-hmm. If somebody was to crash and hit the column, they would have to hit the crash barrier first, then the column, but the turbine's at 2.5 meters above ground. Mm-hmm. It's not going to cause impact. Plus, it's not going to overspin. This type of turbine reaches a maximum rotational speed before, and it just can't let any more air in. The alternator gets to a set speed, and then the magnetic interference starts to slow it down. So there's multiple safety elements in the turbine already. Plus, we apply a brake. There's a control system. It's not just left spinning freely. So we've tried to cover every eventuality with regards to the safety aspect.
That's awesome.
You can't cover absolutely everything.
Of course.
But we think we've got most of the things down pat. The key here is that the turbines are leased. They're not sold. So we maintain the turbine. We keep the ownership of those, but the leaseholder keeps all the energy. And this is why this is vastly different to anything else that's out there. So we don't sell energy. It's not what we do. Mm-hmm. So if So we're working with a number of authorities in the United Kingdom. We've spoken. I did a cracking trip to Chicago at the beginning of the year. I had no idea a place could be that cold, but it was.
Go Cubs.
Um, go Cubs. But we were there to look at the possibility of the city generating a revenue stream from the energy produced by the turbines.
Yes.
So here's the thought. If you're producing your own energy and selling that to a utility, what do you use the money for? Because you're selling the energy.
As a consumer, you mean?
No, as a city.
Okay. I don't know how governments spend their money. I try not to pay attention.
But the biggest impact we can have to our climate is to actually use less electricity. And the best way to use less electricity is to better insulate your homes.
Sure.
But a lot of people can't afford the insulation for their homes. So if you set up a community fund where that insulation is paid for, and this is what we're looking at here, the city produces its own electricity using our turbines. That electricity is sold to the utility provider. That money is used to insulate social housing, to put solar onto
Wow.
schools, to install ground source heat pumps. The people who cannot afford to make the biggest changes now have the changes paid for. It's completely revolutionary. It's not about the electricity, it's about creating a secondary revenue stream for a city or an authority. You have to deal as a city, as people in Chicago or anywhere else that has high speed or heavy traffic, you have to deal with the pollution, with the traffic noise, etc. So why should you benefit? Turning your streetlights into a source of energy generation, you can benefit because you're selling the electricity. But you can also then have the renewable energy credits that you can also sell to bolster that community fund. And what do you do with the fund? And this is why this is game changing. It's less about the turbine, because the turbine we will keep to improve. It should pay for itself, more than
Right.
pay for itself. The more turbines we can produce, the cheaper they get. The cheaper they get, the more can be deployed. The more that are deployed, the more energy you create and sell to your utility provider, who will take every single kilowatt of renewable energy you can generate. And then you have the fund. Solar for schools, ground source heat pumps, insulation for homes. The opportunities for cities to remove fuel burden and fuel poverty are unbelievable. And
Absolutely.
that's why we do what we do.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, especially understanding your origin story. You're really coming at this from an angle of not only how can we tackle climate issues and sustainability, but you're really focused on how can we use innovation to improve our local communities, which I think is absolutely fantastic and a unique angle. I don't hear too often. There is focus, especially with activists, on engaging the local community, but from a business point of view, your thought is really how can I use technology to improve the local community and invigorate or help
So
people. Go ahead.
let me give you some stats. So in on the planet, we've got just over 7 billion people living on the planet. 4 billion of those people either have little or no access to electricity,
Mm-hmm.
or are completely reliant on coal or kerosene to produce it.
Right.
4 billion. If we in the Western world move to electric vehicles, we reduce our consumption, we still have over half of the planet using the highest fossil fuel pollutants.
Mm-hmm.
If we cannot come up with a community benefit on a cheap, renewable energy source, what's the point?
Right.
And that's the sobering piece here. What's the point? COP26 was held in Scotland last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a joke that it was held in Scotland because 25% of all households in Scotland cannot afford the electricity they have access to. They are classed as in fuel poverty. In this country this year, our energy bills doubled overnight because of the price of electricity. We went from 2.5 million households being in fuel poverty to 5 million households being in fuel poverty.
Can you describe that in a bit more detail? I've never heard the term fuel poverty, and I'm
Okay,
in the
if
U.S.
you so
We got
if you
fracking
have
and
to spend
stuff. Different.
so fuel poverty is you've got access to electricity.
Uh-huh.
You are connected to the grid and you are charged for your every kilowatt that you use. If you spend over 10% of your income on heating or cooking, if you spend over that, you are classed as being in fuel poverty.
Okay.
Okay. Scotland, nearly 30% of all households in Scotland are in that situation.
Wow.
It is shocking, and we have this around the Western world. So, if that's in our more advanced areas, what's it like in developing nations? How do we fix that problem? And that's the ultimate goal. We want to be looking at how do we make this as cheap as possible? That comes with scale. And then how and where is the community benefit? Because I'm an advocate, put solar in, make people's bills cheaper. Put huge wind turbines in, make people's bills cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you do something locally, you reduce that transmission distance because that energy is flung into the local grid and it's used almost immediately. So make it cheaper. It makes sense. If I put an offshore wind farm in and it's 25 miles out to sea, I've got to step up that current coming in to land, and then I've got to get it into a main hub before it can be transmitted to where it's needed. That costs for every single mile we do it. So put it in locally, but make it worthwhile. And this is exactly that type of technology.
Right. What are your thoughts on getting these 4 billion people to more renewable energy, or not even more renewable energy, but just getting them energy in general? Because is the idea to get the costs down on this kind of stuff for it to make sense? Because I've talked to people like who are saying that it's not going to make sense for people who don't have access to energy that really want it to start with renewables because I forget his argument. I've talked to all sorts. I used to knock on doors in Boulder, so I've heard all sorts of different ideas. But this model in Chicago is very interesting to me. There's a lot of people who talk about developed countries not living well. There's a lot of parts of Chicago that are not doing so well. So this idea of having an increased
And we
source
went
of
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
of local revenue being reinvested. Are you talking about reinvesting it into this like retrofits, meaning that new technology that once the initial kind of barrier cost is taken down and they get the newest heating and cooling systems, then it can be the bill will go down because it's not burning these fossil fuels or using old tech.
Well,
Yeah, go
well,
ahead.
look at you say old tech. Solar is improving all the time. It's getting thinner. There's elements of efficiency that sun doesn't shine for half the day, so you need a mix.
Mm-hmm.
I think insulation is probably the biggest, the biggest thing with regards to saving people's lives, especially in winter.
Certainly.
Insulation is the easiest. And there are some amazing technologies now. I saw a company that's making sheetrock out of carbon that had been captured. Oh, fantastic idea. Yeah, do that and do it big. But there's lots of brownfield sites. You don't need to cover green areas with solar panels. Or let's start reusing some of these brownfield sites and turning them into energy generation. It's not always about the newest tech. It's about putting it in the right place for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, it's not just Chicago that are looking at that type of scenario. We're also doing that over here in the United Kingdom.
Right.
But insulation is the quickest and easiest way of reducing the amount of energy that people use, which means that they cost them less and it helps get them out of fuel poverty. With regards to deployment of tech, that then comes down to the cities who are involved and generating and creating these funds. There are multiple companies around the world who will pay for turbines because it's a CSR play, their corporate and social responsibility. It's a tax write-off for them. So buy turbines, buy solar, put them in places where they benefit people. Do those things, put battery systems in place. Oh my God, we go out during the day and our solar on our roofs puts energy into the grid. We're not seeing the benefit of it if you haven't got a battery system.
Mm-hmm.
Over nighttime, when we go to bed, you should have a small wind turbine that's capturing that cooler, more dense air and putting that energy into a battery. If you're utilizing a battery system, then you're always using the cheapest energy possible to you.
Right.
So build hybrid systems, put them into poorer areas of the world, Western world, developing nations. All of these things can benefit local communities. But you look at what you can produce in solar and wind and how that would impact a developing nation. It's not just the energy for lighting. You can power a Starlink system. You then give them access to the internet, which means now you're helping to educate. Their day is longer because they have lighting. So the education can go on past sunset. That changes people's lives.
Definitely.
And it can be renewable. Doesn't have to be coal. Doesn't have to be kerosene. Oil is going to be around for years. We're not going to stop it just yet. And we need to accept that. But we need to have reasonable alternatives.
Well, I don't know if we ever need to completely stop it. And I'm thinking about the idea of 100%. It still will have use cases no matter what. It's just to the extent that we're doing it now is absolutely ridiculous. I think I'm not much of an absolutist, but there's always there's stuff on the earth that we can use. One thing I will comment on is this idea of having too much energy coming in through the solar panels, and then absolutely get a battery and store what you need, and then if there's more energy on top of that, it would seem all the community initiatives helping the developing world, I think that's great, and then reinvesting into your local community with funding is great. I think another great thing to do would be to use that excess energy to then power some sort of CO2 drawdown technology, whether it's direct air capture or something that's actually going to get rid of these legacy emissions that we have. That's just an idea that I have. Your angle is very interesting, and it's cool to be talking to you 3 years in. Can you explain how your business model actually works? You're leasing to these local, if not a utility, but a local city will buy your turbine and lease it, and then you lease it to them, and then they keep the credits. How is this work like scalably and like economically?
So, well, the key to any major deployment is scale. And we get the largest supplier discounts from our suppliers the more that we order, the more parts, the more bearings, the more alternators, the more composite. We see the benefits of that scale, which makes the turbines cheaper. Simple as that. The turbines, as we deploy more, our assets grow and our company is more valuable because of the number of assets that we manage. It's as simple as that. The renewable energy credits depends on where we are in the world, but for the most part, we are gifting the renewable energy credits as a sellable commodity to the city,
Great.
because that's why we're here. It's what we're here for. It was never money first. Yes, it's going to be worth billions of dollars. Let's make that really clear. We get it. It will be. But that will come. The whole reason why we're here, first and foremost, is it has to be a secondary revenue stream for the council. There has to be the benefit for the community. Even if every car goes electric, it will still displace air.
Mm-hmm.
We will still turn turbines. We will still be able to produce energy. And that's the key. Now, we also have a commercial side. We have a commercial side where corporations can buy turbines.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst we're gifting to communities, corporations will buy the turbine. That's not a lease model. That's a purchase with a software agreement, with a maintenance agreement. So you've got two areas of this business, one which is a community resource and one which is a commercial piece.
I was just going to say that do you realize that you perfectly represent the new age CEO in my mind as a young Gen Z entrepreneur or just a young Gen Z person? I look up when I think of like, who do I want running large companies? You talk about $1 billion opportunity. I think of you coming at it from the angle of how to improve the community. I think that these are the type of businesses that will be succeeding in the 21st century, and I think that has not been the case over the last 50 years necessarily. I think that I always say that businesses do operate based on a mission, but not all CEOs come from this angle of really it's not, you said first, you were talking about gifting money to communities. Like, I think that's kind of bamboozles some of your buddies from the investment banking world, I would imagine.
I think it's actually the opposite. So ESG, environmental social governance elements of investing, there are trillions of dollars looking for a home with regards to giving something back and improving not just the planet but communities in the whole. Whilst we tick those boxes, it wasn't deliberate. The aim was, where's the benefit first? And you're right that it has to come from that angle first. We then had to work out, okay, how do we monetize this element of the business? How do we monetize that element of the business? Because we've still got to make money. We've got overheads, we've got people to pay, etc. Some very clever people, I hasten to add. But it was always about why do it in the first place? And when you look at the big picture, and yeah, the 4 billion piece is shocking. I actually find it more shocking when I start looking at individual cities and communities and seeing where you can look on a map and you can see the areas of poverty, and it tends to be where the most industry is, and it's a complete oxymoron. You've got all that industry and all that money being made, and that's where the poorest of people live. That's wrong, and we need to fix that model. And that's what we're trying to have a little bit of an impact on that. And it's not gifting. Don't forget, these turbines sit on infrastructure that already exists, has already been paid for. We are being hosted by these communities, so they should benefit. By utilizing what we already have, the existing roads already blighted the landscape, the roads there, the lighting columns are already there. We are utilizing and reusing something that's already been in place. So we're not gifting, they are benefiting.
Yep. That's cool with me, man. I love it. That's just all I was trying to. I just say you kind of represent, I don't know, a better way of thinking about how to build a company. In my humble opinion, I'm wondering, what are some of the most kind of exciting projects? You've mentioned the street lights somewhere in the UK, and then you've mentioned Chicago. Are there any other exciting projects that you and your kind of company are working on right now?
So there's a great project that we've been out in the West Coast at the end of last year. I can't go into too much detail, but there's an opportunity there which would see tens of thousands of turbines being deployed.
Of England, west coast of England.
No. West coast of United States.
Oh, U.S. Cool.
Yes. Now, the aim there is that we would still be able to provide power when the power is shut off in high wind events. So because of the nature of the overhead wiring, the wiring touches in high wind events and causes wildfires. So they get shut off. But we could still supply power. Not necessarily through the overhead wires, but we could supply power to fire control systems, to monitoring stations, so that wildfires are less frequent.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big exciting project for us. Not because it's tens of thousands of turbines. That's a scalable nightmare.
Sure.
For a company where we are right now, where we are in a year's time will be completely different. But that's a huge piece. Anywhere where we can see we can have an impact by producing a revenue stream
Mm-hmm.
is exciting. Chicago could be amazing. Really, really could be amazing. And not because it's the windy city, but just some of the roads are ideal. There's a lot of traffic in the US. Over 140,000 vehicles a day.
I've noticed.
As an example. But I think some of the most impactful are the smallest ones. So my hometown, I grew up just outside of Liverpool, and we have an opportunity for either side of a bridge that was built recently, and knowing that would have an impact to people who still live in my hometown, that's exciting. And on both sides of that bridge, but it might only be 20, 30 turbines, but it's a start. And I know the town itself has probably got somewhere in the region of about, 20,000 lighting columns on high speed roads. That's just one hell of an opportunity. The key for me is to scale the company both here. So we are a holding company and two trading companies. One's in the UK, one's in the US. So we have two companies. And the idea is to scale both of those significantly so we can have the biggest impact. One of the things I was asked about is if I could set up anywhere in the US, where would it be? And I said Detroit.
Yeah.
Because Detroit has gone through hell with the just the downsizing of the automotive industry. But it has all of that manufacturing capability. And you have all of that skill. And one of the things that we always said that we would do is that we wouldn't ship all of our product thousands of miles around the world because it adds to our own carbon footprint. We're not making anything any better if we do that. So why not set up in country? And why not set up in country and retrain people to build and commission turbines? And it's not just the building and commission of turbines, it's the installation and the maintenance of turbines. It's not just that piece of work, it's the turbines have sensors and they collect data. We can monitor the road vibrations, we can monitor the traffic flow information. There's a whole data science piece that's going to grow out of this. And we're fortunate to work with Microsoft on just some of their technology in order to collect this data. But now you're building, you're retraining, you're giving well-paid jobs, you're affecting local communities in that local businesses are having to hire people in order to do your installations and your maintenance and your data science, and it just grows and grows and grows. And they're the most exciting projects ever because it's change in an entire community. The turbines are on a 10-year lease, which means after 10 years, the newest model gets renegotiated and the new models go in. So every 10 years, you're swapping them out. the same. That turbine's now fully paid for, so that can now go to a developing nation free of charge because it's paid for. Those are probably the most exciting things that we will do in the next 10 years, is building communities back up on renewable technology and the residual jobs around it.
Barry, I think you've made your vision and motives very clear throughout this conversation, and I'm like awestruck. I think I always say I'm always talking about the different angles that people are taking, but I liked what you said about. I feel the same way about this podcast when I talk to someone who's just a local business that has a really kind heart and they're just going out and they're just doing their thing. That's some of my favorite episodes, rather than someone who has a lot of followers or something. There's something really endearing about having a small impact on one person versus a giant impact. And I don't know, I just resonate with that kind of idea. So yeah, thanks for what you're doing. And with that said, I do hope it grows because,
Let me make clear, it's not just me. I have
sure.
an absolutely amazing team who are growing day by day. They are phenomenal, and some of the people we work with, the guys at Microsoft, the guys at Carl Morgan, the composite companies, etc. They are just absolutely astounding. And I think one of the things I'm lucky is that I have a team of people who all share this vision, and that's why we will be successful.
No argument there. Any final pieces of advice for young folks who are passionate about improving the world?
Oh my God. I think so. I gave a lecture to a community college in Oregon towards the end of last year, and they asked something similar. I said, we didn't invent a wind turbine. We looked at something a different way. And some of the biggest impacts that people can have is quite simply picking up a pencil and a piece of paper and look at the world around you, look at your immediate world and say, how can I make this better? Because when you look to make your immediate world better, it can grow to something very, very fruitful. Now, we started with plastic soda bottles, and we made a turbine to see if we could create something that had no central shaft. But it started with a pencil and a piece of paper. We wanted to change here. And then all of a sudden, you're changing everywhere. Right. And I think pick up a piece of paper. If you can dream it and you can draw it, you can build it.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Barry, I appreciate the time, man. That's so awesome.
It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. Really do appreciate your time as well. No, it's been awesome.
You got it, man. All right, everybody. See you on the next one. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrealty.org today.